Yo. So today starts the end of your 8th grade year. You've already finished with testing. You probably just want to learn really cool stuff in social studies. So honestly, that's what we're going to do. The World War II, which is the topic that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the year, is probably the coolest social studies topic you could ever talk about. It's the deadliest war of all time. More people died in this war than the next three wars combined together. It's ridiculous. World War II pitted the greatest powers of the time versus all the other greatest powers of the time, and it also took all of the best technology and made it even better, and then made it even more destructive and killed way more people. So if you want to learn about something cool and crazy and nuts in social studies, this is it. Also, you should sign up for Bloody New Orleans. Anyway, so World War II was started because there was one country that had lost the First World War, which you probably heard World War One. So as a result of that, Germany, which had lost World War One, had to pay tons of money to the winning countries, which were Britain and France, and also the United States. But actually, the United States told them, don't worry about it, just don't pay us. But so the Germans had no money to pay. So here you go. You've got Germans fighting up here. You've got Germany giving up in the war. Yeah, let's see what happens. So Germany had no money to pay Britain and France, who had won the war. So what they did is they printed money. And when you print money, you get inflation. Your money's not worth anything anymore. So Germany actually had not just inflation, but hyperinflation, like way more inflation than you would ever think. So now German money is worth literally nothing. So check this out. Kids would play in the streets. This is like the street in front of a house with blocks of money. These are bills wrapped up together because it was cheaper than buying wooden blocks. Ridiculous. These guys are going into the bank or going into the supermarket. No, because it would take one of these giant baskets full of money just to buy some food. It was ridiculous. Money was worth nothing. This lady was burning money instead of buying wood just to heat her house, like a stove. She doesn't want wood, so she puts money in there. Crazy. German money was worth nothing because they had to pay so much to people, and they didn't have any, so they just printed it. Result, hyperinflation. Money was worth, nothing. Exactly. So there was a guy in Germany who blamed all these other people for Germany's problems. His name was Adolf Hitler. So he became a part of a political party, and the party was called the Nazi Party. And he told people that it was the Jews' fault. He told people it was Britain's fault. He told people it was France's fault that Germany had all these problems. And he said that he and his people could lead Germany to greatness. Now, there were a lot of people in Germany who wanted to believe this because they wanted to be great, so they listened to him. If you want to see the effect that he had on people, which I think you do, and this is only a 3-minute video, so it's great to watch, and you get to see Hitler speak. Believe me, he's hilarious now. He wasn't so funny back then. But you should go to bit.ly/DTA Hitler speech to see the effect he had on people. So Hitler's idea was that Germans were part of this master race called the Aryan race. You've probably seen this when you talked about the Holocaust in your ELA class or your literacy class or somewhere else. But he says that Germans have blue eyes, blonde hair, white skin, and that is the greatest race possible. That was his idea. I don't know, it's just his thing. So he thinks that Aryans or Germans, if they controlled everything, then the world would be better. So he's going to start in Germany by removing the Jews. And you've talked about this in your ELA class where his final solution was to kill all the Jews in Europe. And he wanted to start that by taking over all of Europe piece by piece. So here, everything in red is something that Hitler took over by 1938. This is even before the actual World War II started. So he's taking his armies and he's taking over Austria, he's taking over Czechoslovakia, he's taking over all these little countries around him even before the war started. So why isn't anybody stopping him? That's a good question, you might ask. Why wouldn't they stop him? So Hitler's army, even before the war started, was one of the best and one of the biggest in the world. This is just a picture here. You see Hitler giving his speech. He looks pretty small. Look how big his army is. These are just the officers. Here's another picture of his army. Would you want to fight these guys? I don't. His army was called the Wehrmacht, which means World Army. So Hitler was kind of a bully, right? He would push all these countries around and take them over if he felt like taking them over. The British didn't stop Hitler. The French didn't stop Hitler. They decided that they were going to be nice to him and hope he calmed down, which is what some people do to bullies. This strategy was called appeasement. So one of the main guys who symbolizes appeasement and being nice to Hitler is this guy right here. His name is Neville Chamberlain. He was the prime minister of Britain at the time, and he met with Hitler, and they signed an agreement that Hitler wouldn't expand anymore. Chamberlain then returned to Britain and proclaimed to everybody, to the whole world, he says, "There will be peace in our time." He was full of crap because he thought he signed a treaty. He thought he could trust Hitler. He was wrong. Winston Churchill, who was another British prime minister later on, he says an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile hoping it will eat him last. What do you think he thinks about Hitler? Exactly. He thinks that we should take him out now. We should fight him now before he becomes too powerful. So when Germany actually does launch their attack, their army, the Luftwaffe and the Wehrmacht, or their air force and army, were much more powerful than everybody else. So go to this link here, bit.ly/DTA Blitzkrieg, to see what they did and see how they won all of their early battles. They quickly defeated all the other countries, including France, which was their main rival at the time, and then that left only Britain as the one to fight them. So Britain is left by itself. Here's Britain, and you saw in that video all of these countries have been taken over by Germany. So the Germans, they couldn't attack Britain in a blitzkrieg with their Panzer tanks because Britain's an island. They would have to cross the English Channel. So they decided to use the Luftwaffe, or their air force, to attack England. That made it more difficult. So you had a guy named Winston Churchill who decided that he was going to be the leader of Britain and he was not going to give up. He said, "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender." He said it kind of like that. If you want to Google his speech and go listen to it, feel free. It's actually really exciting. I like it, but you can't really understand him half the time. But so he says Britain is not going to give up no matter what Germany does. And he's right. So the Luftwaffe, or the German Air Force, there you go, that's their symbol. Those are their planes. They launch an attack on Britain where they decide that they're going to bomb everything. And they drop bombs everywhere, and people are terrified. You can see here some of the destruction in the central city of London. People had to live in the subway stations because their houses were destroyed, or they were too scared to be outside because the Germans were always dropping bombs. Here's a picture of a place where a bomb fell in the middle of the street and a bus went into it. I mean, this was serious. This was called the Blitz. And they had their blitzkrieg just using planes, and they still caused all this damage. And Britain was alone. There was nobody else helping Britain. Britain was all by themselves. So at this point, the US is deciding whether we should enter the war and try to save Britain and fight for freedom against the Nazis, or should we try to stay out of it and make Britain deal with their own problems, right? Britain can take care of itself. We don't have to have anything to do with this. This is not our war. So right now, go to this link right here, polev.com/sharpdawn000, and share your answer to that question with the class. What do you think? Should we enter it or stay out? At the same time that all this was going on, and I know this is complicated because it's all over the world, but at the same time you have Japan, who is being aggressive and taking places over. This is the Japanese flag right here. You're going to see that a bunch today. That's the Japanese flag, and these are Japanese soldiers who have just taken over part of China in 1945. So here you go, 1942. There's Japan right there, and they took over all of this land, all these islands and everything, all taken over by Japan. Now, Japan at this point gets a little bit cocky, and they say, oh, we've taken all this over. What could we do next? They decide to attack. Terrible decision on their part, but they did it. The United States. They attacked the Navy base at Pearl Harbor and was surprise attacked on December 7th, 1941. You have these Japanese planes that go and they bomb the American ships, killing 2,403 Americans and destroying half of our entire Navy. This was devastating to the United States. So watch these two videos to see what it was like. The first one is more boring because it's actual footage of what was happening. You can see the real ships as they're sinking and getting shot. The second one is from the movie Pearl Harbor. So it's a lot more visual and it's a lot more exciting. Make sure you watch both of those though, so you can see how the United States was bombed, attacked, surprised by Japan. But what happens is that the United States declares war on Japan, bringing the US into World War II. And you have President Roosevelt, who makes this famous speech about Pearl Harbor, which he calls the attack a date which will live in infamy. And you should go to this link, DTA Infamy, to watch the president give the speech. It's really, really powerful and really awesome to watch. And then 4 days later, the United States declares war on Germany. And that's where the war stands at the end of today. And we're going to see who wins and how that ends later on tomorrow and this week. So at this point today, the world is divided. You have Germany, Japan, and we didn't really talk about it, but they're on those same side as Italy. And then on the other side, you have the Allies, Great Britain, USA, Canada, and Australia. Remember, France would have been on that side, but they already lost to Germany. So tomorrow, we'll see who wins.